Okay, so I want you to imagine a legacy automaker, like one of the absolutely biggest in the world.
Right, like a massive global household name.
Exactly. And for decades, they've sold millions of cars, trucks, SUVs. But then suddenly, almost overnight, really, the whole global economy just
Yes,
tanked.
uh-huh.
And they realized that making the actual cars is, well, it's barely breaking even. But the proprietary batteries they've been quietly developing in the background, the profit margins on those are just exploding,
Oh, wow. Yeah.
right? So within a single quarter, 94% of their entire corporate profit is coming from just the batteries alone. The cars, the dealerships, they're basically just window dressing at this point.
Which is a crazy pivot for a company of that size.
It's massive. And welcome to today's deep dive, because that analogy is exactly what we're unpacking today. We've got a fascinating stack of sources to go through, including financial reports, market analyses, and news clippings detailing Samsung Electronics' confirmed Q1 2026 earnings.
Right, which were officially announced on April 30th, 2026.
Yes, exactly. And our mission today is to kind of cut through all the dry financial jargon and uncover this massive hidden industrial shift, what people are calling the AI supercycle.
And it's a supercycle that just produced, honestly, the highest quarterly result in Samsung's entire corporate history.
Yeah, which is why we're so excited to get into this. I mean, you listening to this right now, you probably interact with Samsung products every single day. Maybe you have one
Yeah.
of their smartphones in your pocket or like a smart fridge in your kitchen.
But today, we're not really looking at that consumer hardware.
No, we're looking past all of that directly at the invisible technology that is quietly reshaping the entire foundation of the global economy.
Yeah, because the documents we're looking at, they describe a massive realignment in global tech infrastructure. I mean, we're examining components that the average person never, ever sees.
Right.
Yet they're dictating the capital expenditure of literally the wealthiest corporations on the planet.
And the numbers coming out of this Q1 report card are just, well, they provide the clearest evidence yet of how aggressive this realignment has become,
Oh,
right?
absolutely. The scale of these numbers is really the very first clue that we are looking at something highly, highly unusual.
So let's break down this unprecedented Q1 report card. Because, I mean, Samsung hit a revenue of 133.9 trillion Korean won.
Which translates to roughly 96.5 billion US dollars.
Right, 96.5 billion in revenue.
Yeah.
But the headline figure, the one that really sent shockwaves through the whole financial sector, is the operating profit.
Yeah, that was the stunner.
It was 57.2 trillion Korean won, or about 41.3 billion US dollars, just in operating profit.
And, the financial and securities community responded with what the sources basically describe as undisguised astonishment.
They were floored.
Totally floored. The earnings surprise blew past all institutional estimates. It marked an all-time quarterly record since the company was founded. And to really understand the gravity of this, you have to look at the relationship between that top-line revenue and the bottom-line operating profit.
Right, because revenue and profit are very different beasts.
Exactly. I mean, revenue is just money coming in the door. A company can inflate revenue pretty easily by, say, slashing prices and moving a massive volume of low-margin products.
Right, like having a huge fire sale. You make a lot of sales, but you're not actually keeping much of the cash.
Exactly. Operating profit, however, is the measure of true profitability. It tells you exactly how much cash is left after the cost of doing business.
And the explosive surge we see here points to what? An incredibly high mixed environment.
Yes, an environment where they are just raking it in on every unit sold.
So let's contextualize that $41.3 billion in a single quarter because, well, honestly, numbers that large tend to just lose all meaning for a normal person.
They really do. It's hard to wrap your head around.
Yeah. So if you spread that operating profit across the roughly 90 days in a quarter, Samsung netted about 458 billion, or 330 million US dollars every single day.
Every single day, just in profit.
Every day.
Yeah.
And if you drill down even further, that is 19 billion won an hour, or roughly 320 million won every minute.
That is just staggering.
It's like they earned the equivalent of a mid-sized corporation's entire annual profit in a matter of, like, days.
Orderly.
But I have to push back here for a second. Is this simply a case of, post-pandemic supply chains finally untangling and it's allowing them to fulfill years of backlogged orders, like a weird temporary bump?
No, actually, the data tells a completely different story. This is definitely not a supply chain correction or some simple rebound from a macroeconomic downturn.
Okay, so where's the evidence for that?
Well, the evidence lies in the internal breakdown of that $96.5 billion revenue. When you peel back a layer of the report card, you find that this immense windfall is not distributed evenly across Samsung's various divisions.
Ah, so it's not like every department is just doing slightly better.
Right. It is fiercely concentrated. A single business division is just running away from the rest of the company in spectacular fashion.
And that brings us back to that automaker analogy from the start of the deep dive. The division acting as the battery in this scenario is the semiconductor division.
Yeah, internally known as the DS division.
Right. So they generated 53.7 trillion won, or roughly 38.7 billion US dollars of that operating profit.
Which is just wild when you look at the total.
It is. That represents a staggering 94% of the company's total profit. 94.
It's basically a complete carry job.
It really is. I mean, the consumer electronics, the mobile phones, the displays, all of that combined accounts for just 6%. It's like a single star player on a sports team somehow scoring 94% of the points in a championship game.
That's a great way to put it. And, historical context makes this even more remarkable.
How so?
Well, during previous semiconductor boom cycles, like the memory supercycle of 2017 and 2018, the DS division certainly led the charge. They were the stars.
Right. Chips have always been big for them.
Yeah, but even at the peak of those past booms, the semiconductor division might account for, say, a 60 to 70% share of the total profits.
Oh, I see.
And the other major business divisions, particularly mobile, would reliably backstop the company, creating a somewhat balanced portfolio.
So 60 or 70% is great, but 94% is just unprecedented.
Exactly. This Q1 report card shows the semiconductor division essentially carrying the entire global conglomerate on its back alone.
Okay, so if a single division is pulling 94% of the profit for a company this massive, that implies an unbelievable amount of pricing power.
Oh, definitely.
Because, you don't achieve snowballing profit margins like that in a commoditized, highly competitive market where buyers can just shop around for a better deal.
No, absolutely not. They aren't just selling a standard component here. They are selling a bottleneck.
A bottleneck.
Right.
Meaning buyers must be willing to pay essentially whatever price is asked.
Basically, yes.
So what is causing this level of supply panic? Why is everyone so desperate for these specific chips?
Well, the driving force is the capital expenditure race among global big tech companies, the hyperscalers, as they're called.
Like Microsoft, Google, Meta, Amazon.
Exactly. The global artificial intelligence frenzy has hardened from, an experimental software trend into a vast physical industrial infrastructure build-out.
Right. It's no longer just cool chatbots on your laptop. It's actual massive physical buildings.
Yes. These companies are locked in what is essentially a high-stakes prisoner's dilemma.
I mean,
Well, if one tech giant successfully builds a massive data center cluster capable of training the next generation of AI models, and their competitor hesitates or tries to save money,
then that competitor risks losing their dominant position in the tech hierarchy completely.
precisely. Survival in the AI era dictates securing the necessary hardware at quite literally any cost.
Okay, but we know that training an advanced AI model requires massive server farms filled with powerful processors, usually GPUs.
Right.
But Samsung doesn't design those core GPUs. The sources highlight that Samsung is providing the memory chips that sit next to those processors. So why is memory suddenly the multi-billion-dollar bottleneck?
That is a great question. It comes down to a fundamental architectural flaw in modern computing, which is known in the industry as the memory wall.
The memory wall. Okay, unpack that for me.
Sure. For decades, the processing speed of chips has increased much, much faster than the speed at which data can actually be transferred from the memory to the processor.
Oh, I see.
Imagine having a state-of-the-art sports car capable of going 300 miles an hour, but...
But it's stuck driving on a dirt road with only one lane.
Exactly. No matter how powerful the engine is, the car can only go as fast as the road allows.
And that makes perfect sense.
Right. So in an AI data center, standard memory creates that one-lane dirt road. The expensive GPU processor ends up starved for data, just sitting idle for microseconds waiting for the information to arrive.
And when you are paying hundreds of thousands of dollars per hour to run a massive server cluster, idle time is basically financially ruinous.
It's burning money. So the hyperscalers need a superhighway to feed these processors.
And the specific technology solving this is HBM, or high bandwidth memory.
Yes, that is the exact technology driving this unprecedented profit margin. High bandwidth memory fundamentally redesigns how the memory communicates with the processor.
Okay, so how does it work?
Instead of placing memory chips side by side on a circuit board, which takes up space and slows things down, manufacturers take multiple memory chips and stack them vertically.
Vertically, like floors in a skyscraper.
Exactly like floors in a skyscraper.
Wait, but how do the chips at the top of the stack communicate with the ones at the bottom? I mean, you can't really run tiny wires all around the outside of a microscopic chip without creating a ton of latency, right?
No, you can't. So they use a process called through silicon vias, or TSVs.
TSVs?
Yeah. They literally use lasers to drill thousands of microscopic holes directly through the silicon of each memory chip.
Are you kidding? Lasers drilling microscopic holes through silicon.
It's wild, I know. And then they pass electrical connections straight down through those holes, connecting the entire stack.
Wow.
It turns that one-lane dirt road into a 1,000-lane superhighway, allowing terabytes of data to flood into the processor every single second.
That sounds incredibly difficult to actually make.
It is. The manufacturing of complexity of HBM is staggering. You are trying to perfectly align thousands of microscopic holes across very fragile layers of silicon.
So the yield rates, like the percentage of usable chips actually coming off the assembly line without breaking, must be brutal.
They are notoriously difficult to master. But Samsung has leveraged its decades of unmatched mass production capability to stabilize these yield rates.
So because so few companies in the world can successfully manufacture HBM at the necessary volume, Samsung can basically just name its price to a market that's completely desperate for supply.
Exactly. They hold the keys to the bottleneck.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me, though. Let's look at the historical precedent of tech hardware booms.
Okay.
Because every single cycle we've lived through, the PC boom in the 90s, the smartphone explosion in the 2010s, they eventually cooled off.
Right, they always do.
A consumer buys a new laptop, they keep it for 3 years, and the demand curve just naturally flattens out until it's time for an upgrade. So why are industry experts calling this the 2026 edition supercycle? Like, what prevents this from crashing down once the initial buying spree is over?
Well, the key distinction lies in who is doing the buying and why.
Okay, explain that.
Previous supercycles were heavily driven by consumer replacement habits. Millions of individuals making independent choices to upgrade a personal device. So the demand was cyclical and, honestly, relatively predictable. But the AI supercycle is a massive industrial infrastructure build-out.
Oh, so it's not about individuals buying gadgets.
Bro, it is being driven by a handful of the wealthiest corporations on Earth who view this expenditure as an absolute existential requirement. They aren't buying consumer electronics. They are building the literal factories of the 21st century knowledge economy.
That's a huge shift in perspective. But, okay, if semiconductors are generating 94% of the profit pie right now, we really have to address the optical illusion mentioned in the sources.
Right, the other divisions.
Yeah, what is happening to the smartphones, the televisions, and the home appliances? Did the mobile experience division, the MX division, did they just suddenly collapse? Or are their numbers just obscured by the sheer size of the semiconductor profits?
It is entirely an optical illusion. The consumer electronics divisions did not collapse at all.
Really?
Really. The MX division, along with TV and home appliances, they actually delivered very solid, steady results.
But they'd only account for 6% of the profit.
Yes, but their contribution looks statistically insignificant only because the semiconductor division expanded so violently.
Ah, I see.
In fact, defending their profitability in the current macroeconomic climate was actually a huge strategic victory for them.
Why is that?
Because the global recovery for consumer electronics, particularly smartphones, has been incredibly sluggish lately. Consumers are holding onto their phones a lot longer than they used to.
Yeah, that makes sense. I haven't upgraded mine in a while. So how do you defend profitability when the overall market volume is visibly shrinking?
By fundamentally shifting the sales strategy, they stopped chasing volume and started chasing value.
Okay, meaning they want to sell more expensive things.
Exactly. The mobile division buoyed its numbers by heavily promoting the premium flagship smartphones that they launched earlier in the year.
Like the S series?
Yep, the S series, and especially those high-margin foldable models.
Oh, right.
They accepted that they might sell fewer units overall, but they ensured that the units they did sell commanded a much, much higher profit margin.
That's smart.
And the TV and home appliance divisions executed the exact same playbook. They concentrated on high-value added product categories and aggressively expanded their footprint in the B2B, the business-to-business market.
So they essentially built a sort of defensive moat around their premium product.
That's a good way to look at it.
But, I mean, if we connect this to the bigger picture, from a company-wide portfolio perspective, there is an inherent vulnerability here, isn't there?
Definitely.
Because any CEO in the world would celebrate a $41 billion profit quarter. But relying on a single division for 94% of your corporate profitability, that feels precarious.
It is. If the memory market sneezes, the entire conglomerate catches a cold.
Exactly. So true resilience requires the smartphone and home appliance divisions to eventually scale back up and sort of balance the ledger.
Yes, the vulnerability of a single dominant engine is the primary concern for long-term stability right now.
Right.
At the moment, the Q1 report card is essentially a dazzling solo run by the semiconductor division, with the other units providing steady but quiet, reliable support from the rear.
But to insulate the company from future external shocks, those supporting divisions must regain their momentum eventually.
Exactly. The structural health of the entire conglomerate really depends on a diversified profit stream.
Which leads perfectly to the forecast for the rest of 2026. Can the semiconductor division actually maintain this blistering pace through the second half of the year?
Well, the expert forecast for Q2 and the second half of 2026 projects sustained growth. Very sunny outlooks.
Really? So it's not slowing down?
The consensus view is that the semiconductor market will actually heat up even further.
Wow.
You see, earlier in the year, there was some lingering skepticism that the whole AI frenzy might just be a temporary hype cycle. But that skepticism has largely evaporated.
Yeah, the money is just too real now.
Exactly. The massive AI infrastructure investments from the hyperscalers are fully committed, and they're expected to continue without any disruption. So the robust demand for HBM forms this incredibly dependable pillar supporting Samsung's second-half revenue projections.
Okay, but are there specific watch points that could alter this trajectory? Because it's technology race, right? Meaning competitors are actively trying to undercut Samsung's dominance every single day.
Oh, absolutely. The critical variable to watch is the timeline for the mass production of next-generation HBM architectures.
So who can build the next? Better chip the fastest.
Right. Securing massive new contracts from major tech players in the second half of the year depends entirely on whether Samsung can maintain a demonstrably superior technological lead.
Because the competitors aren't just sitting still.
No, the competitors in the memory space are highly aggressive and highly capable. Cementing market dominance requires flawless execution in transitioning from the current generation of HBM to the next one.
And doing that without compromising those insanely difficult manufacturing yield rates we discussed earlier with the TSV lasers?
Precisely. If yields drop, profitability drops.
The sources also point to a compelling macroeconomic variable that could trigger what they call a gapeless company-wide supercycle.
Yes, this is fascinating.
And it relates directly to that portfolio vulnerability we just talked about. If central banks initiate interest rate cuts later in the year, it lowers the cost of borrowing for everyday consumers, right?
Right. And cheaper credit generally revitalizes consumer sentiment.
Exactly. Suddenly, upgrading that 3-year-old laptop or buying a new premium smartphone doesn't seem so financially daunting.
And that macroeconomic shift is the exact mechanism needed to rebalance their portfolio.
So a drop in interest rates would spark a broad recovery in general IT device demand.
Yes. The semiconductors are currently pulling the company forward from the front, right? But if consumer demand awakens, the mobile and appliance divisions will catch the tail end.
Creating a sort of seamless relay where multiple divisions are driving massive profitability simultaneously.
Exactly, a gapeless supercycle. And furthermore, the impact of the supercycle extends way beyond just Samsung's balance sheet.
Oh, you mean the ripple effect through the domestic Korean ecosystem?
Precisely. I mean, a $41 billion quarter requires an immense volume of raw materials, precision parts, and specialized manufacturing equipment.
They can't do it all completely alone in a vacuum.
Right. This historic corporate win energizes a vast, interconnected network of domestic suppliers in Korea. It acts as an incredibly powerful catalyst for the broader economy there.
It demonstrates that the nation's flagship enterprise is still maintaining a firm command in the most competitive technological arena in human history.
Absolutely.
Wait, let's fast forward a bit, though. I want to play devil's advocate.
Okay.
The hyperscalers are pouring billions into these data centers right now, but eventually They will have poured the concrete, they'll have installed the cooling systems, and they'll have racked the servers.
Right, the buildings will be finished.
Yeah. So what happens to this supercycle when the initial infrastructure is physically built? Does the demand curve for HBM suddenly just fall off a cliff?
It's a logical question, but the assumption that the infrastructure will eventually be finished kind of misunderstands the nature of artificial intelligence development.
How so?
We are really at the very beginning of a structural growth cycle, driven by the scaling laws of AI.
The scaling laws.
Yeah. As developers push to create models capable of complex reasoning, or multimodality, meaning processing video, audio, and text all simultaneously.
Or like autonomous agents doing tasks for you.
Right, exactly. As they push for that, the computational requirements scale exponentially.
Yeah.
The next generation of an AI model doesn't just require a few more servers, it requires an entirely new order of magnitude and compute power.
So it's an ongoing insatiable evolution.
Yeah.
The hardware must continually advance to support the software.
Yes. It is an arms race with absolutely no finish line.
Wow. There's a single defining sentence of this entire Q1 report card. It's a quote from the sources that I think perfectly synthesizes everything we've unpacked today.
Which one is that?
It says, semiconductors launched by AI made $41 billion.
That really sums it up.
It really does. Setting aside all the complex financial statements, the macroeconomic variables, and the intricate details of TSV manufacturing, the core takeaway is absolute.
Yep.
The skeleton of the future economy, the very foundation upon which the next era of technological advancement will be built, is high-performance semiconductors.
And right now, a Korean tech giant is commanding the very top of that global stage. The companies providing the essential physical infrastructure for this new industrial revolution are reaping historic, unprecedented rewards.
They really are. Which leaves us with a fascinating thought to mull over as we wrap up.
What's that?
Well, right now, this $41 billion empire is being driven almost entirely by massive corporate data centers. Right?
Yeah.
It is basically invisible infrastructure. The average person never interacts directly with a server farm.
True.
But the technology industry rarely keeps its most powerful innovations locked in the cloud forever. Eventually, compute power shrinks, it becomes more efficient, and it moves to the edge.
Edge computing.
Yes. What happens when this level of advanced AI processing trickles down into the local devices we use every day? The phone in your pocket, the appliances in your home, the car you drive.
That's the next frontier.
Exactly. If the brain of the AI revolution, these massive remote server farms, is already this incredibly profitable, what exactly is the global economy going to look like when the AI revolution finally gets a body?
That is a wild thing to think about.
It really is. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep exploring the invisible forces shaping our world, and we'll see you next time.